Yo guys, what's up? HexxInkworks here, and today I've got another review from the MTN unboxing that I dropped a few weeks ago. Now my most recent video that I dropped was the street ink line, and now I'm doing their counterpart, which is the street paint line. Now I won't get too much into the specifications of the paint because I already would have said most of them in the unboxing video. However, if you do want to find out more, then either just drop a comment on this video or just look on their website. MTN have given me 4 products to review, being a 10mm dabber in red, an empty 4mm chisel tip marker, a blue wide 15mm marker, and a purple paint refill, which I will be filling the empty marker with. Now I'll just fill up this empty marker because we all know you want to see that, because filling up an empty marker is always satisfying, and then I'll get into the review. Just from shaking up the bottle I can already tell that the street paint has a high fluidity. Now I'm normally used to alcohol based paints being a bit thicker, so it'll be interesting to see what this paint is like. Obviously with it having a high fluidity, that means that when you pump it, it'll get into the nib a lot quicker, which from my personal experience with juicing up markers, I think it has. Now mop markers, because of that high output, typically have no problem with being juiced up, but obviously with the high fluidity of the paint, it's going to make it even easier to juice up the MTN Street Dabber. Now I'll do the first tag without squeezing on the marker, just to show you how far the paint actually gets you. Now the second tag has me squeezing on the marker a bit, and you can see this from the drip and just a general increase in opacity. Now don't forget that this is on copier paper as well, which is a porous surface, so the paint will soak into the paper a bit. I finish off by just doing a few dots and squeezing each more every time, just to give you guys a bit of a reference point of how much you need to squeeze for drips. Now I'll move on to mount board, which is a lot less porous and absorbent, so the paint will obviously react a lot different. You can see that the paint goes a lot further on the mount board, just simply because of its opacity and how well it drips as well. Now I'll move on to glass, and obviously with it being a lot more porous and a lot smoother, this will be really pleasant to write on, just simply because of how the marker glides over the surface and how the paint isn't absorbed by anything, so it just sticks onto the surface. And even though there isn't any white behind the paint to make the colour pop out a lot more, the saturation of the paint is still really good. Now I'll move on to a sheet of metal, and the paint will react similarly to the glass because of how the surface is non-porous and smooth. And this is proven just by me putting up a hand style. You can see how the marker just glides over the metal, and the marker leaves a nice opaque line of red. Although the metal might have a certain finish, and the colour of the metal might affect the overall colour of the paint. Now I move on to the 4mm chisel filled with the purple paint. Now, unfortunately, and I apologise immensely for this, but due to technical problems, this clip is the only clip I have of this marker, but it's a good job we're reviewing the paint and not the markers themselves, because I still have all of the footage for the blue marker, and it's effectively the same difference considering it's the street paint coming out of a pump valve marker, so it's not the end of the world. And you can see here that I'm drawing lines at different angles so you can get an idea of the different chisel tip line profiles. To start off with, I used the marker in a combination of varying directions and angles, just so you can see the different line profiles. I then continue to put up a hand style which is similar to the smaller chisel tip marker, and my apologies for it slightly going out of frame. but due to the paint and the mount board surface, this is a real treat to write on, and it just glides over the surface as well as keeping full opacity and saturation. Now moving on to metal, and you can see how the paint reacts strangely to the surface. Now I don't think that's because of the street paint itself, because if it was, it would react the same to pretty much any non-porous surface. My suspicions are that the surface has a finish to it, and since because of how the marker has a lower output than a mop, it then affects how the paint reacts to the surface. Moving on to glass, and my suspicions are proven, because glass is a non-porous surface similar to the metal, and yet you can see from the purple on the other side and me writing with the blue marker that the marker doesn't react similarly to how it reacts on the metal. Similar to the mop, it glides smoothly over the surface and just leaves a nice, opaque, saturated line of colour. But yeah, that's all the markers reviewed on all the surfaces, and in summary, I really rate the MTN Street Paint. Now I've used a lot of alcohol based paints in my time, but this one seems a little bit different to the others. This one does seem to stand out in the crowd from my personal experience, just because, as MTN have said, it really does have a high fluidity, and I can personally tell just from my experience from juicing up the markers. I don't know whether their formula is a bit different and whether they use different solvents to different brands. I can personally tell that it's a bit more runnier, but that doesn't compensate for opacity, because as a result of thinning something down to try and make it flow better, opacity and saturation typically decrease. But this isn't a case for the MTN Street Paint. Once again, I'd like to apologise to MTN and apologise to you guys for that missing footage. When I realised myself I was missing some, I was super frustrated, but there's nothing I can do about it now. And I'd also like to thank MTN for hooking me up with these products to review again. This has been HexxInkworks with the MTN Street Paint review. Peace out, guys.